Hey everyone, welcome back to this session, or this series, on a very opinionated ASP.NET Core architecture. Again, I am sorry for the title. So this is video number 8 titled Build with Cake. And so what we're going to do today is add an actual build, let's say script, a build script, a step to our application. So we're going to do all of that with C#. We're going to use a framework called Cake. And this is actually part 1 of 2 of a video of the this section of the series. So what we're going to do in today's video, in this one, we're going to go ahead and create a C# project. We're going to use Cake to build our project, create some outputs, and just get that committed. The next video, what we're going to do there is actually start using this as part of a real CI/CD pipeline, or the CI part of a CI/CD pipeline. And so in the next video, we'll go ahead and modify the Cake stuff we work on in this video, and we're going to make it a little bit more useful for what the end goal is of our application, to really be able to deploy it. And so in the next video, we will actually start using this stuff with GitHub Actions. So if you're already somewhat familiar with Cake, this probably isn't going to be that useful for you, but hey, maybe it's a decent overview. So I think a lot of people probably have the question of, hey, why are we automating our build, right? Isn't that something a DevOps developer does, right? Someone else. And I think that's an issue, overall issue within our industry that we need to, I think, get a little bit better about as developers. I think it's too easy for us to say, there's another team that owns this part of our application, so let's let them do that. But the problem is that as developers, we own our application. We know our application. If all of a sudden we need to change the name of a project or something for whatever reason that we think makes perfect sense to us, we've now added friction. We have to go to someone else. So I get the argument for saying, hey, another team should own build pipelines because they can go ahead and do that for multiple teams. But if all of a sudden we on our team need to do something custom, then now we're asking another set of developers, hey, can you go ahead and do this custom thing just for us? Or do this custom thing and we can kind of plug into it, right? If they're writing a bunch of YAML for pipelines and maybe we have like a single file that calls into it. So as an example, where I currently work, on my team, we have a build YAML file. So we use Azure DevOps. And so this file then just calls into some other file. And that other YAML file is owned and maintained by a DevOps team. And so they make a bunch of YAML stuff that we just kind of call into. For the most part, it's just like making a method call, right? That's basically it. But it's all done in YAML. And recently, we had to go ahead and make a change. So something else that we do in my organization is for internal documentation reasons, we all have to self-publish a Swagger file, right? We need to let other developers within the organization know, hey, if you're going to call our application, this is how you do it, right? It's documentation on what those methods are, what the inputs are, all of that fun stuff. And so the traditional thing is, let's go ahead and just start up our application, grab that Swagger JSON file that's generated at runtime, and we'll just copy paste it out and then send it out, right? Put it into wherever it has to go, so that way all that documentation is shared. But that's a hassle, right? That's not us as developers. We automate things. So a thing that we could do, a thing that we did on my team, we made the decision to make our build output that Swagger file for us. So now it happens on every single build. So it's not a thing that has to happen once a month or whenever we get around to it. It just happens every time we commit code to our repo, and then that build pipeline runs. And so that is a thing that we can do because as developers, our whole thing is automating whatever we feel like. And also, the very last reason is I think our tools are better as developers. I look at things on the DevOps side because I've done a lot of those DevOps tasks in my career. A lot of CI/CD pipelines, a lot of infrastructure as code, those kinds of things. And I think that if we jump into those tasks with a developer mindset, I would put the stuff that we'd use on a day-to-day basis against those types of common tools. I think our stuff would win just about every time. And the reason for that is because there's still a lot of maturity that I think needs to happen in a lot of DevOps tooling. So the big one, the one that I'm going to keep talking about today in this video, is the ability to debug locally on our machine. When we go ahead and write this build project that we're going to be creating, we're going to go ahead and write all of this code with C#. We're going to have our IntelliSense. We're going to have the tooling that we're using. Right, I'm using Visual Studio, but if you want to use Writer or VS Code or anything else, go for it. You can use whatever tooling you want. We can still debug it because it's still C# code. That also means that we're running it locally on our machine. I don't know how you've written any kind of build stuff before, build pipelines, but it's way too common to go ahead and just type out some YAML, commit that, and wait for the build server to go ahead and run it and see what failed. And that is a hassle. I hate that as a developer, because we have, like, our tooling has surpassed those kinds of issues, right? That's not something we deal with on a day-to-day basis anymore. And that's it. I assume someday we'll get to a point where a lot of DevOps tooling will be a lot better for local development, and then a lot of my argument will go away. But that's it. That's really just the reason for my dislike of a lot of that tooling. So all of that out of the way, that tangent that I spent way too much time talking about, let's talk about C# Cake. So if you're not familiar with C# Cake, it is a framework, essentially, for writing some kind of CI/CD type of task with C#. It started, I know I should have looked this up before, instead of just saying, I think it started just as a build tooling, and then it's kind of evolved over time, so you can go ahead and do your build and your deployment with C#, with C#, with Cake. There are other tools in the ecosystem. Nuke Build is another popular one. I don't know the difference, honestly. It's just years ago I started using C# Cake. It was the one I learned about first. I really like it. I don't see a reason to jump to Nuke Build. If there is a really cool feature there, yeah, sure, I don't see why not, but I'm sure both of them can do exactly what you need them to do. So choose one, flip a coin, and then just go forward with it. Now, one of the things about C# Cake, actually this is kind of true about Nuke Build, but I don't know that tool too well, is that by default with Cake, it uses a single file. So it has its own set of tooling internally, so you can just write your whole thing, like a script, right? Like as we usually in the past, we would think of compiling our application with a build script, right? Like that just became the phrase, the build script. And so with C# Cake, you were able to, or still are able to, write it with a single C# file, which, hey, that beat the actual built-in stuff in C# by years, right? Because I think in .NET 10, right, we're getting that ability to go ahead and run a whole C# program in a single file, so that'll be interesting. We'll see what happens there. Anyway, we're not going to use this default stuff. We're going to go with the traditional full-on C# project, and the reason for that is because I really don't like putting a bunch of code into a single file. If you're just going to do like a single, hey, here's like 20, 30 lines of code, yeah, that goes into a script, sure, I guess that works out for you. But like every project, this thing grows. And I like the ability to go ahead and pull out code into other files or other methods, and it's just a lot easier to do that in that more traditional way where we have a project and all that stuff, right? We can go ahead and throw in our abstractions. We can wrap things better, all of that stuff. One of the other issues is that, personally, I never liked the single file because the tooling there isn't as great. Granted, the last time I looked at that tooling was like 5 or 6 years ago. It's just I had a lot of issues with getting IntelliSense working and stuff like that. So maybe it's way better now. I don't know. I haven't looked at it. I just went with the whole CS project concept and then just went with that. So the way we use a full CS project is by using a NuGet package called Cake Frosting. So they're keeping with that name. By the way, if you're ever going to search for Cake, the project is named Cake, but just search C# Cake, because if you just search Cake, on the internet, you're going to get very different results, tasty results, probably better results, to be honest. But C# cake, that'll get you an actual, the technology thing instead of an edible pastry. All right. Now you're probably wondering, hey, how are we going to go ahead and run this in our pipeline? We're used to writing our pipelines in YAML, and that's essentially a proprietary thing that we're using for whoever our build provider is, right? GitHub Actions, Azure DevOps pipelines, Jenkins' thing, GitLab's thing, etc. Right? All of these companies provide things. A lot of them, for the most part, you can just use YAML, but again, that YAML is proprietary to that vendor. So how do we run this? Well, we've got the line down here. We're just going to drop down to the CLI. So the thing that I like to do with these pipelines is we'll go ahead and do the YAML with anything proprietary, anything specific to that platform is done in YAML. And then anything that can be shared goes into the cake project. So the reason for this is because that means more of this I can go ahead and test locally on my machine. If we start to blur those lines, then that's less that I can just verify by running on my machine. And then it just becomes a hassle, right? Then we're back to the original problem of uploading the code to the build server and waiting for it to run. And that's never fun, right? It's not great. So closing out this presentation, a reminder, this is all very opinionated, especially the thoughts that I had earlier on all of that DevOps tooling stuff. But again, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, etc., there are the YouTube comments here, and then you can find me on social media. Like I said, Blue Sky, LinkedIn are the two. You can find those direct links on my site, programmeral.com. All right. So with all of that stuff out of the way, let's go back to Visual Studio right here, and let's actually start writing some code. So we have our project that we've been working on for a while now, and let's go ahead and add a new solution folder, and I'm just going to call this one build. We can go ahead and throw it into the same folder. You can also throw it into a different folder, whatever you prefer. I've gone back and forth. Right now, my personal mindset is let's just go ahead and throw it into the same project because it's all part of the whole one big solution, right? So let's go ahead and add a new project, and this is going to be a console application. And let's see, let me make sure that location is correct. Cool, that's good. Let's call this one build, and we'll create it. .NET 9 is good because that's the default for everything else in the project. We do want to make sure container support is disabled because this is not going to be running in a container. This will be running just locally, raw. All right, so that's created. Let's go to our dependencies and let's manage our NuGet packages, and let's go ahead and browse, and we're going to type in cake. We'll hit enter, and notice we actually have a lot of cake options here. So as far as cake goes, you can actually go ahead and find a lot of things to just, right, it's just abstractions to make some of the things we want to do easier. So oh boy, I'm just scrolling through a lot of things that I haven't seen, like cake AWS. If you want to push files to an S3 bucket or something, right? Curl, docfx. Oh, docfx. That's useful for API code, etc., right? All of this fun stuff. So we don't care about this. We're just going to go ahead and add frosting. Cake frosting. Let's go ahead and install that. Give that a second. Accept. All right, cool. That's good. And that's the only one that we're going to need for our project, because if I go and click onto the package details, you'll see, hey, we get all of our other cake NuGets there. So perfect, we're good. All right, so now we have this. I'm going to go ahead and delete this, all of this code. I'm going to just go ahead and copy paste some stuff from over here, from a different monitor. And I actually have two files. So we'll start with this first one, this application build configs. So I like to go ahead and just create a record that'll go ahead and just set a bunch of paths for projects. Now in this case, this is a simple project, so a simple application, so we only have a single project. It depends on what your build is going to do. If you're keeping things really simple and you just have a single API project, then this is going to be a lot easier. But in other applications I've worked on, we have different kinds of things. So for example, our build will go ahead and compile a backend API and also a front-end application. And that maybe that front-end application is like, that's the admin application. The standard UI that's used by the public can be maintained by someone else, or maybe it's in the same folder, right? That's all organized differently. So however you choose to build this stuff, I tend to just I like to put it all in one thing, so that way later on when I have my CI/CD pipeline run, I just click that one deploy and it deploys everything. That's my personal opinion. Do whatever works for you, but um, because because I like to put everything there. Normally, my build configs file, this is going to have multiple records with everything. So we're going to go ahead and leave this, but you can see this is a record that has a handful of properties in it. And we're hard coding a bunch of this stuff, right? We're going to receive a root path of this this application, and we're just going to say, okay, well, from that root path, we know where everything is, right? We know where the feedback app is, and all of that stuff. Let's see. Okay, and you know what? Actually, I need to change some stuff because I'm looking over at where I'm going to be running this stuff from. You know what? Actually, let's leave it. I think we're good there. I'll just change some other inputs later. We'll come back to that. So let's go to our program up here, and I'm gonna copy paste some stuff, and we'll add over time. So this as far as a cake application goes, the bare minimum is really simple. You start a cake host and then a build context. And so let me copy paste some other code over here. This is the build context, and this is just like settings, that kind of stuff, right? So here's a bunch of properties that our build context is going to have. We're going to set some things: the build configuration, right? Debug, release, etc. The root directory. So this is going to be the start of where everything is to look for. And then here's our feedback paths, and that is this thing right here, this record that we created. So as far as getting our information, we're going to receive these things as input arguments, right? As CLI arguments, right? Input to the application. So the target is really simple. Now argument is a default, has a default value. So if someone wants to say which target to use, we can go ahead and use it. Honestly, I've never run this without the default. I really should just get rid of this line for simplicity. You know what? Let's do that now. Let's just do that now. Equals defaults. All right, cool. I've never passed that in. I can't foresee me ever really wanting to pass that in, so we'll leave it. We'll talk about what that target is in a second, if you've never used it. So as far as these next two, build configuration and root directory path, these are the two input parameters. These are going to be passed in through the CLI that we're going to go ahead and use, and that's it. Those are the only two input arguments that we need. Now we have a little helper function down here that is forcing that we it's forcing the fact that we require these values. So we're just going to say, hey, let's go ahead and get the argument. Unfortunately, Cake doesn't have something to require that parameter. At least the last time I checked, it doesn't. So it's just, if we don't get the value, if we get a null value, then let's just throw an exception. That's it. That's all we're doing. And then later we're passing those two into our feedback paths, which again, let's go back for a third time. Why not? Here we are just kind of forcing where everything is. So, which is common, right? Your whatever pipeline you have, that's all gonna kind of force where everything is. So one of the downsides to a lot of build projects and publish, like CI/CD pipelines, you end up with a lot of hard-coded strings. Way more than I would like, more than I think any of us ever care for, any more than we want to exist. But that's just the nature of these kinds of projects. So you end up with a lot of hard-coded strings, and it's just a hassle, I guess, once you get to a point where you have to make any changes. So hopefully you never have to change your project name or some directory or whatever. But if you do, hopefully you do it early too, right? So, all right. Anyway, all of that stuff out of the way. This is the bare minimum. Sorry, this isn't the complete bare minimum. The final bare minimum is the actual tasks, which I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to copy paste again from this other project that I have just to save myself a bunch of time. So this is our task. So remember earlier when I said default, our default task. So Cake works based off of tasks, and it says, okay, so for me to run, I'm going to run a task with a name, and hey, cool, we have our name default right here. Awesome. And if you look at anything online, this is what you're going to see in their documentation, right? Their example, and that's where I got it from years ago. Now, your task might be dependent on other tasks having completed before it. So, notice that when I copy pasted, there's one that I have called Publish Applications Task. I haven't copy pasted that one yet. We'll get there. But the idea is, hey, let's just have task A, B, C, D, etc. So that way we kind of force the fact that this has to happen before this and this. And I guess you don't have to really separate everything. If I wanted to put all of my build code into the default task, that's an option. But we're not going to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and copy paste a couple of tasks from my other screen up here, and then we're just going to go through it. So let's see. Oops, nope, wrong button. Control A, M, M. All right, there we go. Let's minimize everything, and let's look at things one at a time. So the very first task that is going to run is this output parameters task. And this is just helpful to us as developers, right? Let's just go ahead and output some stuff and just make sure we know what the parameters are of everything. That's it, just something simple. Next up is clean, right? We're just going to go ahead and start deleting some directories. And when you're on a build server, this usually doesn't matter, but we're going to be running this locally on our machine right now. Well, when I say right now, I mean in this video, not like this moment, in like 2 minutes. So we want to go ahead and just delete some stuff. Like, that's it. That's the only reason we have that clean. All right, the next task we have is going to be our .NET build. Finally, the thing we assume we should be doing, right? So we're going to go ahead and actually do two project builds. So you have your choice, right? Do you want to build the solution or do you want to build the projects? I tend to go specifically for those projects. There's pros and cons to them. It's just whatever's easier. I've had some issues in the past because my project over here in the top right corner has the build inside of it. So now we're building the thing we're running, so that could be some issues. So we'll just go ahead and just run the individual projects. So the actual build itself, really simple, right? We're going to go ahead and build the project. No restore is false means, yes, I do want you to pull down the NuGet packages. So that's a whole thing. Yeah, and then the build configuration, we'll pass in release or debug, whatever we want to use. But that's the build, right? Really simple. Unit tests will be the next task, and this one, again, very simple. This one we're not even pulling out into a separate thing. Honestly, we probably should just be lazy about, you know what? Let's just do that here. Let's go ahead. I'm just going to cut and paste this up above into the .NET build task, and we'll paste this, and let's go with private void. Oops, void's already there. Run unit tests. And we'll go ahead and, yeah, let's just go ahead and pass in, yeah, that's perfect, cool. So string, project path, and here we go, let's pass that, perfect. And we'll just copy paste this right in here, cool. So now we're running our unit tests as part of this task. I guess we should rename this task. Now let's leave it. It's not descriptive enough, but I can't think of a better phrase off the top of my head. So we'll go ahead and leave it. So we'll build and then run the tests. Yeah, cool. I mean, unit test passing should be part of the build passing anyway. So that sounds good to me. So that means that we've also deleted this unit test task. So let's actually, whoops, I deleted too many curly brackets. So now we have this is dependent on, right? Because that's that whole hierarchy of tasks. So we just have to fix the name of that. So instead it's dependent on that build.NET task. All right, so the next one in the chain is publishing. And so this is actually creating the final artifact that we care about. So in this video, what we're going to be doing is just publishing our API to some folder, and then we're going to go ahead and copy paste all of those files into a zip file. And so if I scroll through here, right, we've got our publish feedback API. So we're going to do two things. First is we're going to delete the app settings files. So normally within our project, right, like we have these files locally on our machine, but that's not something that should be deployed, right? For the most part, we should be, my opinion, is that we should be deploying our applications config without static files. Like something else should be setting those values. Something as part of the deployment. Maybe the infrastructure as code should be doing that. Something else, right? I don't like any of those values being checked into source control, even if it's something that's kind of always static, right? Maybe we shouldn't. If we want to use it as a template, now that's a separate thing, and maybe that should be included in the build, right? The template should be included, but not the actual values. So that's why I like to throw a step in here to just make sure we don't commit any of those files. The other benefit is it makes the final artifact a little bit small, just a tad bit smaller, because we have less files in there, right? So if you can delete any of those files, go ahead and do it, because it makes that deployment just a fraction of a bit a little faster, right? So that's it. So let's delete those settings files, and then we'll publish our application. So again, no restore, no build, because we've already done that in the previous steps. And we'll actually do the .NET publish to an output directory, and that's this right here. So one of the variables is, hey, when we publish it, put it into this other folder, right? So that's one of the values that we've created over here in our static set of values. So the publish directory is going to a folder called publish/feedback app. So that's that published part. The second half is the zip folder. So remember I mentioned let's go ahead and generate a zip folder. So we need to make sure some paths exist. So let's write some code to do that. And then we'll go ahead and C# code to take a bunch of files in a folder, put it into a zip file. And that's what we're doing right here. And then let's go ahead and output some information just to say, hey, we've put the file over here, which is very helpful in any kind of build scenario, because when this is running on another server, you don't always know the path that you publish it to, right? That's like 99% of the time you have an issue with any kind of automated build. It's the path, so just always the path. All right, and that's it. That is the very final task that we're doing. So that's the tree, right? So just a reminder of how this works. Let's see. Let me minimize everything. We say in our build context, the target is going to be the default task. So we go to the default task. It says, well, hey, before you run this, we are dependent on running publish applications. Okay, well, let's go to publish applications. Well, before you run this, we're dependent on .NET Build. And before we do .NET Build, we're dependent on clean. And before we do clean, we're dependent on output parameters. And that one does not have a dependency. So now we've built our tree. It's kind of it's a whole thing. Because I'm always putting in default, I probably should combine this in some way, right? Maybe just have one class with like a bunch of methods. That would probably be the better thing, but this is how I did it when I first created it, my builds, just because of examples online, and I guess I'll go ahead and leave it. I've never really needed to change it. It's good enough. It's fine. Yeah, I know it's really different from how we normally write code, and now that I'm showing other people, it's bothering me. So I'll probably change this at some point. Now I have like 20 other builds I have to go fix. So now I'm on a tangent, and I'm sorry about that. So let's actually move on to the next thing. So we should run this, right? So let's go ahead and actually run this. Now we have to do two things. So first we're going to set this as the, wrong button. Set this as the startup project. So we're good there. Second, we need to pass in these parameters, right? Build configuration and the root path directory. So let's go ahead and right click on that, go to properties, and I forget where this is every time, debug, and open launch profiles. Now I already have written this out in a different location. So let's go ahead and paste that. And I did actually forget, let's see, let's not put the feedback app as part of the path. So we're going to pass in, hey, we want to do a release build, and for the root directory, this is just going to be the full path to the application. So as you can see, this is where it is running on my machine, and that should be good. So we can go ahead and close that. I'll hit Control-Shift-B to build. Let's go ahead and let that run. Give that a second. Okay, cool. Everything succeeded. Awesome. And hey, let's go ahead and run this on my local machine. And let's just pick another one. Yeah, let's do the publish. Why not? All right, so we have two breakpoints, one at the start and one towards the end. So I'll hit F5. Let's go ahead and run this. And hey, look at this. So I can hit F10 a couple of times. Our build configuration is release. Root path is this whole thing that you saw me copy paste. And as far as our feedback app paths go, we have a bunch of strings that are set. And these look about right. I did test this on a separate project beforehand, but that is stored in a different directory, so I'm really hoping everything is good. So let's get rid of this breakpoint, hit F5, we'll let everything run, and oh no, something failed. Let me actually move my console window over here. Whoops, that's running in the wrong spot. So what is it complaining about? Oh, so we got our outputs, so that's good. Clean this build. Project file does not exist. Well, that's not good. What is the project file path that it's talking about? Oh, you know what? Maybe I do need that full feedback app part. Let's see. Oh no. Let's go ahead and copy paste that. And I'm going to go ahead and open this. And I'm sorry, things keep opening on different monitors. So, let's see. We are here. Oh, whoops. Okay, you know what? That is a problem on my part. Let's see. So here's the project directory. Is the API project directory used anywhere? I'm sorry. Yes, that is actually used there. Okay, so let's see. So, let's just do this. Source directory is actually going to be here, right? So, because if I go back to where we were before, right, the build 8 pipeline, this is the path we're going to pass in with our CLI, and we'll go into feedback app. And so the directory for the project will be one more feedback app in, but the unit tests need to stay up there. Cool. So let's go ahead and leave that. So source directory, and then you are, let's see, this thing. Actually, you know what? That is going to be dependent on this one. See, remember earlier when I mentioned that paths, you know, if you have issues with your build, it's always the path. Oh, God, it's just, this drives me crazy. All right, so the full path of this is, actually, I think we're good there. Just the one directory, so API. Okay, then root directory. Let's go with source directory for this. And okay, Control-Shift-B. All right, cool. Let's go ahead and hit F5 and let this run. Compiling. Hey, okay, cool. Looks like we're good. Great. We hit our breakpoint. Awesome. So everything built successfully, and we can go ahead and step through, and you can see, hey, yeah, we're building everything. We're publishing all of this stuff. Cool. So I think I've got the demo out of the way. Yes, you can go ahead and build that. And then let's go ahead and look at our console. We'll see our output that, hey, we ran our unit tests. All 3 succeeded, none failed. That's great. We published things out to a specific directory. Awesome. And then here's the full output from Cake of our individual tasks, how long they took. So we can see, hey, it took 18 seconds total. I think a lot of that was because of that breakpoint that we hit. So awesome. So, hey, this all looks good. And so because we have all of that, let's go back up here. And, oh, you know what? We're actually one step higher. We'll go into our publish folder, and we'll see, hey, this is our published stuff. So we have our feedback app. This is everything. Or I can just double click on this, double click on that zip file that we generated. Awesome. So we have all of our DLLs and all of that fun stuff. Great. Okay, cool. So we have everything stored up here. Awesome. And let's see. Did I look in the wrong spot? Oh, man. There was one other thing I wanted to point out. The coverlet stuff. Oh, we're not outputting that. Okay, I'll fix that later. We don't need to do that as far as this goes. It's just, you know, if you run your unit tests with .NET and you want to have that history of all that stuff, the coverlet tooling will make that easy for you. But I guess I did not copy paste some of that from another project when I was writing this up, getting ready. So, all right. Anyway, that is it, right? So our application now has a full build as you know within our application, and so this is going to be run at a later point in time by our CI/CD process. So that'll be the next video where we actually set up a GitHub action pipeline to go ahead and run this. We are actually going to make a couple of changes to this cake frosting script right here. We're actually going to have it, instead of create a zip file, we're going to go ahead and deploy it to a Docker container registry hosted by GitHub, and then we will then use that in a even later video to go ahead and do the deployment. So let's see. Thinking about everything else that I wanted to say, I probably said everything, so let's go ahead and cut it there. Thanks everyone for watching. Again, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, we have the YouTube video right here, or social media, Blue Sky and LinkedIn. Just search Programmer Al. You'll go ahead and find me. And until next time, take care, everyone.